I've lived in the same city for years without encountering anything out of the ordinary. Sure, there were whispers about certain places being haunted, but I brushed them off as nonsense. I never believed in ghosts, not until the night everything changed. It was a Wednesday just like any other. I had gone out for a drink with a couple of friends from work, something we did occasionally to break up the monotony of office life. We spent a few hours catching up, laughing over cheap beer and greasy bar food before heading our separate ways. I wasn't drunk, just pleasantly buzzed, and I decided to walk home. It was a cool night, the kind where the city feels alive with possibility, even if it's almost midnight. The streets were quiet, only a few cars passing by every now and then. The streetlights cast long, eerie shadows on the pavement. I wasn't nervous, though. I'd walked these streets 1,000 times before. I knew every alley, every shortcut, and I always felt safe. But that night was different. I took a shortcut down a narrow alley. It was quicker, and I was tired, ready to crawl into bed. About halfway down, I heard it. Footsteps behind me. My heart started to race, but I tried to stay calm. After all, it was a busy city. People were always out and about, right? I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see some late-night reveler heading home, but the alley was empty. A chill crept down my spine. I quickened my pace, my pulse now pounding in my ears. I couldn't shake the feeling that something, was watching me. I looked over my shoulder again, and this time, I saw her. She was standing just a few feet behind me, barely visible in the shadows. At first I thought she was just another woman walking home, but there was something off about her. Her clothes were soaked, clinging to her skin like she had just stepped out of a downpour, though it hadn't rained in days. Her hair was wet too, stringy and hanging over her face. But it was her eyes that sent a bolt of terror through me, wide, empty, and filled with something dark, something angry. I tried to speak, to ask if she was all right, but the words stuck in my throat. Before I could do anything, she vanished, just like that. Gone as if she had never been there. I bolted. I don't know how long I ran for, but I didn't stop until I was safely inside my apartment, the door locked behind me. My heart was still racing, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I'd had a little too much to drink and the shadows had played tricks on me. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. Her eyes, that terrible emptiness in them. By the time morning came, I was exhausted but ready to convince myself it was just a weird, isolated event. It couldn't have been real. Days passed and I tried to put it out of my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, like a weight pressing down on me. And then one evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, I stumbled across an old news article. It was one of those cold case stories that pop up every now and then. A woman named Eva had been murdered in an alley just a few blocks from where I'd seen her. The article described how she'd been found, soaked in rainwater, her body slumped against a wall. The date of her death, almost exactly a year ago. My stomach twisted as I read the article over and over again, trying to make sense of it. Was it possible? Could that have been her? A ghost? I didn't want to believe it, but the more I thought about it, the more the pieces started to fit together. I started doing more research, diving into forums and websites I would have laughed at before. I found out that I wasn't the only one who had seen her. Other people, mostly late-night wanderers like me, had reported seeing a woman in wet clothes, standing in the shadows of alleys and dark streets. Some said she was harmless, a sad, lost spirit. But others said she wasn't. They said she was dangerous. It wasn't long before I started noticing her more often. I'd catch glimpses of her out of the corner of my eye when I was walking home late at night. She never came close, but she was always there, just watching, waiting. One night I saw her again. This time, it was different. She wasn't standing far away, hidden in the shadows. She was right there in front of me, her eyes locked onto mine. I froze, my blood running cold. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stood there staring into her dead, empty eyes. She whispered something then, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "He took everything from me," she said, her voice hollow and distant. "Now I take everything from them." Before I could react, she was gone, but the words stuck with me, echoing in my mind. She wasn't just a lost soul, drifting through the afterlife. She was hunting, taking revenge, and she wouldn't stop until she had claimed enough lives to fill the void left by her own death. I wish I could say that I never saw her again, that she moved on or found peace. But I'd be lying. She's still out there, in the dark corners of the city, waiting for her next victim. I've tried to warn people, to tell them to stay away from the alleys at night, but no one listens. They all think it's just a story, just another urban legend. But I know the truth. I've seen her. I've felt her cold gaze on my back, and I know she's not done. So if you're ever walking home alone at night and you feel like someone's watching you, if you hear footsteps behind you but no one's there, run. Don't look back. Don't stop, because she's out there, and she's always hungry for more. I never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. That was until I moved into my grandmother's old house after her passing. The house, a sprawling Victorian structure, had been in our family for generations, and despite its age, I felt a strange connection to it. The day I moved in, I noticed the unsettling quiet that surrounded the place. My grandmother had always spoken of the house as if it were alive, with its creaks and groans echoing through the halls. I laughed it off at first, but as the sun set and darkness enveloped the rooms, an eerie stillness fell over everything. That night I tried to sleep, but something kept pulling me awake. A soft, whispering sound floated through the air, barely audible, like someone calling my name just out of reach. I chalked it up to my imagination, a trick of the mind in a new and unfamiliar environment. Days passed and the whispers grew more distinct. I would hear them when I was alone, usually in the hallway outside my bedroom. Sometimes they would seem to come from behind the walls, like secrets being shared between shadows. I began to dread nighttime, feeling as if the house was watching me, waiting for me to surrender to its ghostly grip. One evening, while unpacking old family photos, I stumbled upon a faded picture of my grandmother as a child, standing in front of the house. There was something odd about her expression. She looked frightened, her eyes wide and searching, as if she were aware of something lurking just beyond the frame. I dismissed it, convincing myself it was just a trick of the light. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers escalated. They seemed to take on a life of their own, growing louder and more insistent. It was as if the walls were trying to communicate something to me, a warning perhaps. I often found myself standing in the hall, straining to decipher the hushed voices that danced just beyond my understanding. One night I decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, I crept through the darkened house, the beam of light cutting through the shadows. The air felt thick, charged with an unsettling energy. As I approached the old creaky staircase, the whispers became a cacophony, swirling around me, urging me to go upstairs. I hesitated, but curiosity overpowered my fear. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing ominously in the silence. At the top, I found myself in a long, narrow hallway with doors lining both sides. I felt drawn to the last door on the left, a room I had never entered before. With trembling hands, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was dark, curtains drawn tight against the world. As I stepped inside, the temperature dropped. I could see my breath misting in front of me. The whispers were now a low, rhythmic chant, filling the room with an almost palpable dread. I fumbled for the light switch, my heart pounding in my chest. As the overhead light flickered on, I froze. The room was empty, save for an old, dust-covered mirror that hung crookedly on the wall. It was large, ornate, and strangely beautiful despite the grime. But it was what lay behind me that sent chills racing down my spine. In the reflection, I saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was a woman, her features indistinct, but her eyes dark and hollow. She seemed to be watching me, her mouth moving, forming words I couldn't hear. I spun around, but the doorway was empty. I was alone. Panic surged through me and I stumbled back, my eyes fixed on the mirror. The figure remained, still watching. I felt a pull, an inexplicable urge to step closer. The The whispers turned into a frantic pleading, begging me to listen, to understand. I approached the mirror cautiously. As I drew near, I felt an icy breath on my neck, as if someone were standing right behind me. The whispers turned into a shriek, an anguished cry that echoed through the room. I spun around again, but still, nothing was there. When I looked back at the mirror, the woman's face was clearer, a twisted expression of sorrow and rage. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging me into darkness. The whispers morphed into a chorus of screams, filling my ears with terror. I could feel the air thickening, pressure building around me as the walls seemed to close in. I turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. I pounded on it, desperation clawing at my throat. The screams intensified, drowning out my own cries for help. I stumbled back to the mirror, and in that moment, I realized the woman was no longer just a reflection. She was pulling me in. My reflection twisted, morphing into something grotesque, and I felt cold fingers wrap around my wrists, dragging me toward the glass. The whispers became clearer, revealing their haunting message. Join us, forever. In that moment, I understood that the house had its secrets, and I was meant to uncover them. I fought back with everything I had, but the pull was too strong. The mirror shattered, glass splintering everywhere, and I felt myself being sucked into the darkness beyond. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the floor of the empty room, heart racing. The whispers had ceased. I scrambled to my feet and fled the house, not stopping until I reached the safety of my car. As I drove away, I glanced back at the house, its windows dark and foreboding. But the whispers never truly stopped. They followed me, whispering in the back of my mind, reminding me that the house was still alive and that I had awakened something within its walls. I've since tried to forget, but I can't shake the feeling that the woman in the mirror is still waiting for me, watching, whispering, waiting for me to return. As I stepped into the heart of the Amazon rainforest, I felt an intoxicating blend of excitement and trepidation. My name is Clara, and I had come to the village of Sonara to study the rich tapestry of life and culture that thrived here. But beneath the vibrant greenery lay whispers of an ancient terror, the jungle witch, Iska. The villagers were quick to warn me. Do not stray from the path after sundown, they said, their voices hushed, eyes darting toward the tree line. I laughed off their superstitions. I was an anthropologist, armed with reason and a thirst for knowledge. Surely I could uncover the truth behind the legends. That night, curiosity gnawed at me like a hungry beast. I gathered my notes and set out into the thick underbrush, flashlight in hand. The jungle was alive, a cacophony of sounds, the rustling of leaves, distant animal calls. Each noise a reminder of the unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. As I ventured deeper, the air grew heavy, thick with humidity and an almost palpable energy. After what felt like hours of walking, I stumbled upon a clearing illuminated by an eerie glow. At the center stood an enormous tree, its twisted roots resembling gnarled fingers clawing at the earth. Beneath it lay an altar crafted from bones and stones, adorned with symbols I could not decipher. My heart raced as I stepped closer, compelled by an unseen force. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the clearing, soft yet commanding. You seek what you do not understand, outsider. I turned, my pulse quickening, and there she was, Iska, the jungle witch. Her presence was otherworldly. Draped in tattered vines, her skin looked like a living piece of the forest, textured and scarred. Her eyes burned with a wild intensity that seemed to pierce through me. I'm just here to learn, I stammered, desperation creeping into my voice. I want to understand your ways. Her laughter rang out, haunting and reverberating through the trees. Understanding comes with a price. The jungle remembers the greedy and the foolish. The words settled into my bones, a warning I could feel deep within. But I was too far gone, entranced by the mystery. I mean no harm. I only wish to share your knowledge with the world, I pleaded, even as a shiver of fear coursed through me. Iska's eyes narrowed, her expression shifting to something more serious. Knowledge is power, and power corrupts. I will show you the truth, but you must listen to the whispers of the forest." With a flick of her wrist, the ground beneath me trembled. Suddenly I was engulfed in visions, specters of the jungle's past. I witnessed tribes that had vanished, their rituals drenched in blood and sacrifice. The spirits roamed, bound to Iska's will, their faces twisted in sorrow and rage. I felt their pain, the weight of their stories pressing down on me. "This is incredible," I gasped, overwhelmed. "But what do you want from me?" Iska stepped closer, her breath a mix of decay and earth. "You will carry my message to the world. Show them the consequences of their greed. But if you fail, you will become part of this jungle, just as the others did." Before I could respond, the world around me twisted violently. I was hurled back to the present, gasping for breath. The clearing was empty, and the shadows closed in around me. Panic surged within me. I turned to retrace my steps, but the jungle transformed into an insurmountable labyrinth. Each turn led me deeper into darkness, the trees closing in like a trap. I stumbled, calling out for help, but the only response was the jungle's mocking laughter, a cacophony of whispers that taunted my every step. I could feel the weight of Iska's warning growing heavier, and with each heartbeat, I realized how foolish I had been. Desperate, I ran until my lungs burned, searching for the path back. Just as I was about to collapse, I broke through the underbrush into the clearing once more. But it was different. The altar was now surrounded by flickering lights, spirits swirling in a mournful dance. Their cries echoed in my mind, a haunting chorus of loss and despair. Iska appeared again, her expression inscrutable. "You have seen too much. Will you carry my message, or will you join the spirits of the lost?" I fell to my knees, terror and regret flooding through me. "I will tell them. I promise. Just let me go." The witch regarded me silently, and the spirits paused as if awaiting her decision. "Very well. You may leave, but remember, the jungle never forgets. You will bear the weight of its secrets." In an instant, the wind surged around me, and I was back at the village's edge, trembling and gasping for air. The villagers gathered, their faces etched with concern. "What happened?" they asked, but I could only stare into the depths of the jungle, haunted by what I had seen and heard. From that day forward, I spoke of the beauty of the jungle and the need to protect it. Yet deep inside, I carried Iska's warning like a shadow, a constant reminder of the fine line between curiosity and dread. On moonless nights when the wind whispered through the trees, I could still hear the witch's laughter echoing in my mind, a chilling reminder that the jungle's magic was never truly gone, only waiting for the next soul brave or foolish enough to wander too deep into its embrace.